Hi guys, welcome to the Improvement Season podcast. It's me, Steve Hall, and on the other side is Pascal Floor. And I almost want to get the audience to guess how old you are, Pascal. Should we just get them to guess in the comments on YouTube or tag us on Instagram and put your score.
And you're not allowed to cheat. You're not allowed to go over to Facebook. I think Instagram, you can't see it or so.
No,
right?
you can't see it on Facebook.
I don't even know whether I have it up on Facebook as well with my birthday.
It's on Facebook.
Okay.
Because I found
also
that's where I found it.
Also with the year?
With the year.
Oh, shit. I can change it, though.
You can.
Before this is actually going live. Yeah, but in the comment section below, please give me the numbers. And be serious about that. We all know that I'm not 80 years old, so yeah.
He's 12.
Yeah.
Just very mature
12-year-old. Very mature one.
So on your end, things are, well, happy birthday, first of all, but also
thank you very much.
You're not feeling the best this birthday, probably partly age.
Yeah, I think so. When the other guys who are now in the mid-40s are saying like, yeah, recovery is impacted already. I can feel the training here and there. Yeah, maybe this is what I'm going through right now myself. Maybe my mind wants more than my body is capable of. I mean, this is definitely what I've done here. I was capable of pushing myself more than my body could handle here in week number 5, but I was first realizing that after I finished week number 5, because I went into week number 5 still feeling fresh. Otherwise, I wouldn't have done it. Why would I do that anyway? So yeah, now after week 5, I'm completely crushed. After the recording of the last Improvement Season podcast, I went to the doctors on the Friday, to the ophthalmologist, get my eyes checked and tested. Nothing was detected there. My eyes were just fine. And he basically then said like, okay, I'm sending you over to the neurologist to get just like everything checked there. And this is what I basically expected, or we basically expected, due to the stressful environment of week number 5 and just me completely overreaching. And that this is, of course, massively impacting the central nervous system and thus, neurologically speaking, very demanding. So right now, I yet haven't gone to the neurologist because I think it's irrelevant to go there now, the way I feel now, because it would screw the actual results. So it would be as if, I can't really think of an analogy. Sorry for that, Steve. And normally I'm always capable of doing so, but it's not giving the accurate results because I messed myself up and this is not how I feel. Normally speaking, this is right now, so it could very much be that he's now looking for something that is simply not really there. The thing I need to say though, and this is now when an analogy comes into play, where I already told you, I'm a little bit afraid though, because it's now present since over a week with just like having colored flashes in front of my eyes. It's not impacting me too much. I mostly notice it when I take a look at black surfaces or go into a black room or so. Then I truly can see like the color flashing in front of my eyes. On a daily basis, it's more like that I'm just absolutely feeling lethargic the entire time. My eyes are just tired the entire time. But I was already telling you that I'm a little bit worried that I triggered something maybe that was sleeping or sleep. So a neurological disease that may have been there already, that was just waiting to be awakened with a very severe trigger or so. And I brought up the example with Godzilla. Godzilla is asleep, century-long sleep, right? The Titans are asleep. Nothing is going on with the world, with war in the world against the Titans. So they are not fighting each other. But human race is now there, and they are doing atomic bomb testings and all that kind of stuff. And that is awakening the king of the monsters, right? And basically, that was the artificial trigger that then awoken Godzilla. And this is what I'm afraid now happened to me as well, that I, with the amount that I pushed myself, perhaps awakened something, neurologically speaking, that shouldn't have been awoken, if that makes sense.
It makes sense. I'm hoping that, I wouldn't jump to any conclusions. It's easy to like Google stuff and then be worried. I know you're not doing that.
Dr. Google, he's the worst. Google. I mean, well, if you want to get worried, then just like Google some kind of symptoms that you're experiencing. Like, honestly.
Did anyone reach out to you over on Instagram and scare you?
Yeah.
I was blind when this happened to me the next week.
Some people reach out, which I always find a very, very kind. But also at the same time, it's like, do you have all of the context? It's like coming or jumping to conclusions from the context that you have in front of you, and only because you have gone perhaps through a similar experience doesn't mean that it's actually that. This is also basically what many doctors are doing, right? It's they are coming to a conclusion based on their experience. The longer you have been in the industry, the more of a disease, or more often of a disease that you've seen, the easier it is for you to actually then realize what it actually is, and especially when it comes to very rare diseases that are hard to detect. What many doctors are doing is just like guesswork based on the amount of symptoms that they are seeing or so, right? And this can be massively screwed by the way the patient is describing the symptoms and describing how they are feeling and all that kind of stuff, right? So for me, it's just like when I speak about it, I don't know, maybe it's just I perceive it a different way than other people are perceiving it, and maybe I'm describing then some of the symptoms a little bit in the wrong way or so, and thus it's just like, okay, when I want to get it very much checked, I need to see a specialist. That's the only way to go about it, right? But there have been some people reaching out like, go immediately to the ER because this can happen. And yeah, it's true. I mean, I've Googled that myself as well. So yeah, I checked out Dr. Google. But it's just, yeah, you never know until you actually get some tests done. And my eyes were absolutely clear. So yeah.
Yeah, it's weird because there are some things. I guess in some ways you could compare it to like going, for listeners at least, like going to contest prep and you're that lean or whatever, or peak off-season mass and you're that kind of feeling nauseated by eating. Only by pushing to those extremes and experiencing those in real time can you know what that's like. Or I use the example of like blacking out. I've fainted like a few times in my life. Yeah. But if you've never fainted before, it's a fucking weird thing to try and describe to someone.
Yeah, and to me it's so funny because we just talked about it right before we actually hit the record button. But for me, it's just when people are saying that if you're using RER training, you're not training hard. Holy shit. If that wasn't training hard with losing your eyesight in the 5th week, I don't know what is. I don't know what the other guys are then experiencing who are always training to failure. Like, please tell me, do you feel that, what is that the norm for you? That you're just walking around blind? Like, honestly. And I'm just like, okay, everyone who's saying like people who are training with RER are training or are pussies and not training hard enough. Please do me the favor of training the way I did or we did here in these kind of mesocycles. Do me the favor. Just prove it to yourself then, right? That this isn't hard training. Prove it to yourself if you're so convinced about it, right? And I would be very curious to see how you end up going out of this mesocycle then, because I was fucking wrecked. Is it absolutely mandatory to do that? No, absolutely not. Perhaps there are even some future detrimental outcomes to that, especially when you push too hard. Perhaps you need even more time to heal and rest up. Beauty is though, if you're wary and if you're cautious with or conscious with your execution and lifting technique, the risk of injury is highly decreased. And this is something that I can attest myself now. I haven't been injured in a very, very long time now, even though I can wholeheartedly say that I train the hardest I've ever trained. And this is such a nice thing. And this is another proof to me how important it is to really take care and hone in your technique and be wary of your execution. Because I'm doing a lot of sets, and we all know that every single unit of volume is a unit of risk. But if you're then also taking care of your form and execution, you can actually decrease that risk that is coming or being added with every single unit, right? And for me personally, this has been the longest streak where I haven't experienced any kind of injury, and also not even any kind of nagging things, which most of the time stem from bad form and also lifting with your ego. There was a time where I was always like, my hip, especially my hip, is very susceptible to being inflamed due to my pre-medical condition there. But even that didn't flare up with all of the hack squats, with all of the leg presses I was doing, right? Nothing. Why? Because I didn't really lift with my ego. I actually went all of the range of motion under control. I controlled the range and the range of motion, and I didn't use any kind of momentum with any of the lifts. And that did me so well. I don't feel my joints. I don't feel my tendons, even though that I'm probably doing much more volume than I've done over the past 2 years, and also much more intensity, much higher intensity throughout the entire mesocycle.
Yeah, it can't be talked about enough how important having excellent technique is, and how, like, I don't know why people are so against the idea that load actually doesn't really matter. It's just like, you don't, like, the heavier it is, the lighter it is, it doesn't matter as long as the kind of relative intensity is there and you're using good technique and form. It doesn't matter. You can build massive quads with any load. It just needs the relative intensity. So yeah, like, people always like to comment and say things about kind of, oh, like this much weight or whatever. And it just comes from a place of ego. And once you eat your ego and, like you said, just go for technique and feel like the difference is huge, and you listen to your body, you auto-regulate loads. And to me, and it's funny, like talking about hard training, like that final week where you have built volume up over time, it's the highest volumes you're doing, and you're training to or very close to failure, and you have to own every single repetition, keep control of the load, own your technique. That's hard. It's very easy to let momentum come in. It's very easy to let repetition speed increase. That's what your body wants to do. So to actually keep the tension on the muscle group and own that load, that final week of like the mesocycle, especially when I say this when you're massing, because your MRV is even higher, you've got that kind of stimulus right there. Those are some of the hardest weeks of training. And so, yeah, for you to go through that, I think is a good thing to test the limits a little bit. And maybe you notice Absolutely. You pushed a little bit too far, but without doing it, you don't learn. So sometimes I have clients who are in their, like, I don't know, 4th or 5th week, and they're like, like they're kind of almost 50-50. And if they're a little bit more advanced and I think they have good technique and they're very honest, I'll push them just to see how things go in that next week. Because without pushing there, you don't know what your limits are.
That's exactly what I've been thinking as well. So I just recorded a vlog for our membership site where I'm just talking through my experience with the last mesocycle, especially week number 5. And I make it very clear that I think that it's not absolutely mandatory in going there. We also know that right now it's very unclear whether there's a true benefit in set progression or not, right? Whether there's even a benefit in doing some kind of a periodized session. I personally believe there is. It's always then also boiling down to a personal preference, because you have to do so much more work and effort for less and less of a return, right? So if you add one set more, then you probably get a little bit out of it additionally. Not linear growth though, right? If you do another set on top of it all, you get even less out of that, but it requires so much more. It accumulates so much more fatigue. It takes so much more of your time and effort and all that kind of stuff, right? And to some people, it's simply not feasible and also not worth it. And actually pushing it that far for that little bit of extra, right? But for me, it is. Why? Because I simply love it. I love testing myself. I love going there. I think that I have the mental capacity in going there and actually going over the edge. That is not always a good thing, though, because that could also be, of course, damaging and harming, of course, right? And this needs to be acknowledged as well. But I also have somewhat of a sadistic tendency here, and I like going there. I like testing my limits. every single time. And in doing so, I think you're always then wiser in hindsight, and then you can make some adjustments moving forward. Will it be under the same circumstances in the next mesocycle? Probably not. Some adaptations will have taken place. You're mentally and also physically probably in a different spot. Maybe I'm weighing a little bit more. Stuff like that always comes into play. It's the same thing with when you are talking about peaking, that you can practice peaking, but overall, the circumstances are always quite different, and thus you always have to make some adjustments based on the circumstances. And that's why having a set peaking plan never really works out, and that's the same in planning the next mesocycle, right? You can have somewhat of a structure, but then you always need to go with the flow and make the adjustments along the way. So yeah, I planned already my next mesocycle. We'll probably start with a little bit higher volume in the first week so that I don't need to push perhaps for 5 weeks. And also because I think that my MEV to MRV ratio right now is has a very high gap in the gaining phase, because I know I get a good stimulus and a good biofeedback with quite minimum sets. I still get pumps, still get some metabolic disruption the first week, right? But then I push it up there and I need to keep pushing. And at some point it's simply unfeasible. Over that time, you're accumulating a lot of fatigue, which then possibly could mask the overall progression that you're doing. And why not then do or start closer to the MAV in week 1 already and then progress in 4 weeks instead of going all the way from MEV to MRV, accumulate too much fatigue perhaps, and thus perhaps even dampen and mitigate some of the things that you could have done throughout a mesocycle, if that makes sense.
And well, yeah, I imagine your MEV will be potentially a little bit elevated from the last mesocycle anyway, especially if you're not making much changes in terms of like exercise selection, rep ranges. If you're keeping things fairly steady, I'd imagine you won't get quite the same. It depends. For me, on some exercises, I'll do like, for example, at the moment, like cable lateral raises. I don't think I've moved them up from the, like when I do 2 sets in week 1, like I get a major pump. I don't really need much more. I'll go 2 up to 4 sets in a mesocycle, because more than 4, and I'm just like, oh, that last set didn't really.
I have
wasn't
the
additive.
Same with bicep curls. No matter what kind of bicep exercise, everything beyond 4 sets, and 4 sets is the absolute maximum for a session, everything beyond 4 sets, and it just is absolute junk volume. And I can immediately tell that it's junk volume. 2 sets sometimes are more than enough for me to actually get a very, very decent pump in the biceps. 3 sets is most of the time where I find myself throughout the mesocycle. Maybe I push for 4 sets if at all necessary, but I rather like to have that energy available in other departments, such as for heavier compound lifts, that in my opinion will give you more overall for the time that you're investing than putting it towards curls. And yeah, I know people will say like, yeah, but that's not a lot of fatigue that you're accumulating, and you should always be able to do another set of curls. Yeah, sure, absolutely. Same goes for something like forearm work, right? But at some point, if you're already training like twice daily, 4 times out of the week, and then 2 times just like once per day, or for you, in your case, 6 times twice daily, at some point, even the sets of forearms will fatigue you, right? And then you have to just like realize where to put your, what's it called? Where to put the potatoes in the basket?
Eggs.
No, what? Yeah.
Eggs,
yeah. The eggs, exactly. The eggs. So here he is again with the potatoes. Because at some point you just have to then realize like, okay, do I want to really just do a lot of curls, or do I want to rather do another set of pulling movements where I know that it has also a direct carry over to the curl or to the biceps, but I also then get the rewards, especially in my back. And what really makes a physique, right? I don't think that a lot of curling makes a great physique, but probably like heavy pulls, heavy presses, heavy lower body movements, stuff like that, right? And the other things are just accessory things, like the cherry on top of the pie.
Fast, efficient fat loss. Does that sound like music to your ears? The mini cut movement might just be for you. Mini cuts are like robbing the fat bank. You want to get in and out with as much fat as possible. In a short period of time, you could easily look to lose 6 to 12 pounds of fat. The mini cup movement is excellent. There's group support for extra accountability and also expert help within the group. We have educational videos to keep you on track along the way, and you get all your nutrition and training customized and individualized for you. So if that sounds of interest, get involved with the mini cup movement. Yeah, I think part of it is also the time investment. Just the time investment for an extra set of like barbell rows is so much, like there's so much of a greater reward than doing an extra set of curls. And how many extra sets of like curls and then I don't know, whatever, like a lat push down, straight arm push down or something. You have to do an extra one of both of those to make up for that, and maybe some shrugs to make up for one set of barbell rows. So quite often I will have clients where I basically put their calf and ab work at sometimes I put it as optional depending who they are, and then maybe just leave it at MEV and don't progress it unless they're like, Steve, I want to do a bit more of this. I'm like, okay, if you've got the time and your energy, you want to build that up, like fine. But for a lot of people, and people probably clients listening will be like, oh, that's why like you don't push those, because most people don't care that much about those elements unless they're a bodybuilder and it's a weak point or something like that.
Yeah. And the thing is also like, do you really want to progress then in a set progression manner with every single exercise? At some point, holy shit, the time will just ramp up drastically, especially if you're not splitting things up in twice daily training. And even then it's getting towards longer sessions. If you were to like, you, for example, me, for example, I don't know how you do things. I haven't seen your spreadsheet in a longer period of time, but let's just say like the quad dominant AM session or so. I'm doing something like a hack squat, then leg extensions, then something for the abs and something for the rear delts, right? 4 exercises. On paper, that doesn't seem like much. In the first week, it also isn't that much, right? But then if you were to always then add a set based on your biofeedback for every single exercise, then by the end, it would be basically already a single session in it for itself, right? And this is something that you want to avoid with something like twice daily training, because that will burn you out very quickly, right? And we also brought it up once again, set progression is not absolutely mandatory. And I think for some exercises, it's simply not worth the extra effort, the extra time investment, when we also know that you can easily and very well grow from something like 2 or 3 sets of an exercise. And then once again, why not put that extra effort towards the exercises that really do make a change and really do make a difference?
Yeah, for me, I will always emphasize those big compound lifts towards the start of a mesocycle, and then towards the end, if I'm or the client is still exhibiting like their recovery in time and they can deal with more, I'm like, well, you're already doing like maybe 5 sets of hack squats. Let's just tag this onto the leg extension, because your session are like RPE or whatever it is. The session is fucking destroying you. You might be able to do a bit more quad, but you're not able to do more compound because the systemic fatigue is just way too high. They fill in the gaps.
What was for you personally? I don't know if that's the right question to ask, because when I really think about it, there are so many different ways in setting it up. But what is the highest amount of sets you've been doing for one specific exercise? And that comes with a prerequisite of saying like, okay, let's say you have 2 exercises for that body part in one single session. So
most exercises, 5 is about as high as I can go, especially for big compound lifts. And some of them, like 4 is as many as I can get. But for maybe, it's pretty much only calves, I could probably get to like 5 plus. But fuck, calves, they're bad. They put a bad taste in my mouth. I fucking hate calves. Me too, I just feel like you could keep going.
I even more hate doing abs though. I don't know how often I actually, and I have to admit that, I'm so sorry. I actually then just like called it at 2 sets instead of doing 3 sets here in this mesocycle. Oh, sorry. Sorry for the ab god up there.
I may have, I think I just did 4 sets today. I don't know. 4, maybe 5, but fuck me. fucking hate abs.
Yeah, me too.
But 5 sets seems to be for most things like a good limiter. I can't. Again, maybe some like carbs, potentially I can go a bit above that, but most 5 is about where I like it.
So if we're then saying like 5 sets for a single exercise, are you then also pushing it up to 5 sets with the other exercise? So let's just say that you have a total amount of like a cap number of 10 sets for that body part in a single session.
So yeah, possibly pushing up to like if I'm exhibiting the ability to recover from that. That's why I had a moment. Well, I came to this conclusion because I would sometimes have like, I don't know, maybe on a leg day particularly, and I just put like one exercise for quads or one exercise for hamstrings on a like the other's kind of dominant day because it was less volume. But I found I was like, oh, I can still add more here, but I can't add more sets to this same exercise. I should have started my mesocycle with another one, even if it was just one set. So yeah, if I find towards the end of the mesocycle, if I don't really like going over 10 sets for a muscle group in a single session, I find, and I think that is in line with the literature, like much more than 10 sets seems to just get into, you're just creating more fatigue and potentially damage, and it's not particularly productive. If I'm finding that I could go for more than 10, then that's when maybe I'll go to even higher frequencies. I think you're running for some of your upper body, like push and pull, like 3 times a week at the moment. Yeah. That's when and I'm thinking next mesocycle, I might go there, especially for back. Actually, at the moment, my back is 3 times a week. I have been running that a little bit, but I need to structure it a bit better because I'm just tagging on like some lat pull downs to my hamstring light session at the start of the week, and I don't know. I don't particularly enjoy that.
For me, it works great with a higher frequency for the upper body. So I'm doing upper, lower, pull, push, lower, upper, and I recover quite nicely from that, to be honest. I know that some other people can't get away with that, and that, of course, brings me up to somewhere around 20 to 28 sets for something like the back or so, right? But we also have to consider that, of course, not everything is then just coming from one exercise. So especially for the back, because it's such a complex construct, right? If you really want to focus on the back, then of course you need to take into consideration the pulling angles and the different exercises. And I also count something towards that when I'm doing like, I don't know, I always try to consider what kind of pulls I'm doing, right? And I try to complement that with the other exercises as well. So what I'm doing, for example, is the first day I'm doing more of a horizontal pull followed by a vertical pull. However, then also from the handles that I'm using, I'm always focused on that as well. So the first day I'm doing a supinated EZ bar bend over row, right? And then for the vertical pulling movement, I'm most of the time using a close grip hammer grip handle, right? So that there is a clear difference in the muscles that I'm targeting. Of course, this then always depends on the way you angle and position yourself, right? Especially on the lat pull downs, you can pull towards more so the sternum, for example, or more so the high end of the chest. This definitely gives you a slightly different activation of the back, and also how far you are actually arching your back and leaning backwards, for example. And these are things that I, of course, always take into consideration. But that allowed me to recover fine, but also trying to, and I know it sounds bro-ish, but trying to hit the back from all angles. And chest is the same thing. What I would very much recommend people in doing is actually checking out Chris Barrakett's new video series. It's great about like targeting the chest in different kind of ways and things that need to be considered. I think he just released the second part of the video series out of 3 parts. Some things that I already questioned him about, where I was like, I'm not entirely certain about that, to be honest, especially about the decline discussion. But it also gives me a little bit of a different perspective on things. And it's funny because I watched the first video where he specifically talked about the decline press being actually a good chest movement, and I questioned him about it. That was the time when I think Sega-san, so one of our listeners, actually said something in the comment section about what about decline presses, and I had to say that perhaps my views are changing on the decline press. I'm not entirely certain yet. I want to wait for the third part of the series from Chris Berricat, because he said like, okay, wait until the end of the part of the series so that then we can have the discussion, and then perhaps your questions have been answered already, and then I also have the entire context. But I'm always open for then, making my training more complete, more efficient, more effective, and also that, of course, carries over to my athletes' training as well. And I think it's very important because of the things that we are always saying, that we are open-minded and we want to get the most out of training, and that we are not biased, or try at least to not be too biased. I think everyone is biased to some extent, but trying to be open-minded, and when new evidence is coming out that perhaps changes your views, that you're also willing to change your views. And I totally deviated from my original thing that I wanted to say in regards to the set numbers. But yeah, here we are now talking about decline presses.
What I'm interested, where were you having the back and forth? Was that on YouTube?
No, it was over on Instagram. It wasn't really an in-depth back and forth. I've seen
on
that
his post.
Yeah, I've seen that Evan Gottby actually posted something, and I was actually more so in line with what Evan said. And I then also asked Chris what his opinions are on like the angle on properly executed bench presses. And I'm not speaking about overly exaggerated arches, but more so just a stable position where you are putting yourself in a naturally declined position. And he basically said like he's going to talk about that in other upcoming videos a little bit more. And I basically said, okay, then I'm waiting, because otherwise it's redundant to have a discussion when perhaps you're already answering my questions that I'm having. And if not, then we can fall back and actually further talking about it. Right now, I still have my beliefs about it, that the angle that you are putting yourself in is mimicking a decline press in a much, much safer and more efficient manner than actually putting yourself in that decline bench position where you're not really stable. You can't really create an arch, thus not a really strong pressing foundation from. Also, you're putting yourself in a little bit of a compromised and dangerous position as well. So I'm not entirely convinced about his standpoint and the things that he brought up in the videos, but I'm willing to first and foremost listen to hear his views, and many of the things that he actually said sound valid, sound very reasonable, right? But it goes to show still whether a reasonable sounding argument is still the valid one.
Yeah, I think with my perspective is very similar. I think we've talked about decline pressing before, but I'm just thinking back even when I used to, because everyone used to decline flat and then incline, like you have to hit the whole chest. But I can remember doing it, and like you're stronger, and that was awesome. But if you're using a barbell, you need a spotter. You can't put that back on your own. Like it's pretty like dangerous. Dumbbells, you can do it, but it's a bit awkward, like lying back and then pressing up like that. I'm thinking you can use more weight, but probably more fatiguing at the same time. Again, like you say, the arch, you kind of get a bit of lower chest because you're kind of in that naturally declined position. And then most people want a bigger upper chest, and their lower chest isn't lagging, I find. Those are kind of, that's where, so we're probably both coming from the same sort of place.
But, and this is where he was coming from, and I don't know whether this is true or not. I really tried to wrap my head around that, because he said that exactly to that argument that you're bringing up, that for most people the lower chest isn't lagging. I think perhaps it is, because he brought up the example of the golden era, and I don't know whether this is a representation, a true representation of the whole lifting industry as of yet in comparison to back in the days. But he said like they were doing a lot of decline presses and also dips, right? And they had great chest developments. Nearly every bodybuilder of the golden era, you can actually look back and be like, yeah, fucking amazing chest, right? But then you would need to actually take a very, very close look into the natural scene as well and be like, okay, what is the natural scene looking like at the moment? What are the guys' chest development? And I don't know. When I think about most of the athletes that right now in my head, and I could be completely biased though, then I really do think that most people don't have the greatest chest. And that is me, myself included. And perhaps there is even something that we are neglecting because we are not really focusing on that too much. So I don't know yet. And that's why I'm always open for these kind of thoughts where I'm just like, yeah, maybe there is something to that. And maybe we shouldn't just disregard it. Whereas then there were just like other arguments, such as also one of the things that Dorian Yates once said, and this is where Evan then came out and said like, okay, this argument is kind of not true. Where I was then also jumping on board and said like, yeah, I don't really go along with what Dorian said there. But yeah, it's interesting. And I think this always brings us closer to how we can get the most out of our training, right? Yeah. Because if we are not willing to change our views on certain things, then we will probably always stay in our lane and never go to a place where we possibly can get more out of things. If you're too dogmatic, then you probably won't get the most out of things.
Yeah. It's similar to like thinking I have to squat, bench, and deadlift to grow. It's like if you're dogmatic thinking you have to do those things, you probably are holding yourself back if you're dogmatic against machines, which there definitely are people. So it's definitely like interesting, and it's a tricky one because with situations or those sort of discussions, everyone wants a black and white, right or wrong answer. There's not going to be. He's going to be right. Yeah. You're going to be right. Or you're both going to be slightly right and wrong, whatever there is, or we are. So it's, yeah, I'm interested to see, because Chris is a smart guy. But I remember
Absolutely.
he says some things that differ to my opinion in terms of like pre-exhaust as well. He quite likes like shortening the muscle. I think in the podcast we had, he likes shortening the muscle before doing like the RDL, for example, or something like that. And that was a bit like, oh, I'm not sure. So a lot of the time you have to just like N=1, try it out. I've had clients who like the pre-exhaust and I'm like, okay, if you find that to be better for you, let's run it. I'm not going to, like, I'd not be that dogmatic where they're telling me this is better, Steve, or like, I'm telling you. And I'm like, nah, this is my way.
No, absolutely. But I find it just interesting overall because this is what I wish more people would take on board instead of being, and this is what I think many people also interpret differently and wrongly most of the time, that we are saying this and thus we hate on something, or we are not the biggest proponents of that. While that may be true, perhaps even in this moment, that we are not implementing it with ourselves or with the majority of our athletes. That doesn't mean that we disregard the possibility that there is something to it, right? And I think as long as you're open-minded and you change your views once you're presented with more evidence, I think there's nothing wrong with actually having your views now, but also then being willing to change your views in the future if more evidence is coming out.
Yeah, I think it's a really easy example for me would be like, some people don't believe resensitization phases are useful or required by any means, so they don't use them. And it's like, well, we have an opposite opinion, but we can't like factually prove one another right or wrong. There is no right or wrong in that case. It's just what you found to be, I don't know, what sits well in your mind in terms of logically, and then what in application you've seen to work better for people. I think like at the end of the day, hopefully science will get us further to the truth. And this is why actually the podcast like roundtables are so awesome, because sometimes you see people got to the same sort of conclusion through different avenues, or they think a little bit differently, but they accept one another's views and they're not like, this is definitely right or wrong, which is always nice.
Yeah, Mike also said a couple of times that some of the roundtables made him rethink some of his views, especially the roundtables with Menno, for example, because most of the time Menno has such a clear, different view on many, many things. But this is great. We need people like this, right? That have different views, not just for the sake of having different views, but that are based on very well thought out ideas.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool.
Questions? We have some time.
Let's go.
So, where did we get to last time? Do you remember?
I think to Justin, and then we have like 4 questions left.
Oh, cool. So, Francisco back.
No, I think we didn't cover Justin's question.
Yeah. Justin Rodriguez, we won't forget
My
you.
man.
So, Pascal, what tattoos do you have? Let's start with that.
Colored tattoos.
Colored tattoos. Some are Marvel.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, my right arm is like superheroes. It's not just Marvel though, but yeah, mostly superheroes. And on my side here, ribcage, I have a couple of super villains. And I didn't continue though, because the ribcage is a fucking pain in the ass to get tattooed there. And at some point, it was just like I didn't have any kind of money in doing so and continuing. And then after a while, I was just like more and more into bodybuilding, and then I couldn't be bothered getting my ribcage tattooed because of the pain and the time to let it heal and all that kind of stuff. Perhaps in the future, one more time, I'm then getting my entire upper body covered, because I always wanted my neck to be covered as well. And perhaps I'm getting that in the future. I had some ideas, was running them by my tattoo artist. He said, Pascal, this is going to look like shit once you're getting older, because the skin, especially here on the neck, when this is getting a little bit looser and stuff, exactly, it's getting saggy. And when you're then getting older and the motifs that you want to have, they would just look like shit, right? So, yeah, I need to rethink and reevaluate what I want to have on my neck then at some point. But this is definitely going to happen. And also then chest and back. But this is in the future when the muscles that aren't really present right now are especially not present then anymore. Yeah, other than that, I have like a couple of old tattoos on my left arm. The left arm is more like random things that I've done over the years, especially like the first tattoo I got on my left arm, stuff like that. I mean, and then I have one kind of my lower abdomens. This is more like a personal thing from back in my musician days. It's from a band that was very close to me, that I was working with, but also living together with. And it's just like for that memory's sake. And yeah, these are all the tattoos that I have. And yeah, my penis is also then a light tower as well.
I thought it was
a rocket.
I don't know what I was going to say. I have no words for this apart from I was going to say no one asks me about my tattoo.
No.
You've not ever seen it, have you, Pascal?
No, the tramp stamp.
Only when I showed you my glute shot.
Yeah.
When I had no underwear on. You can see the little love heart.
Inside the butt cheeks.
only for special people. And anyway, so what about, and I think we've covered this before, but it'd be good to cover it briefly. What about impacting the stage?
I mean, there are a couple of tanning products that are very well at covering up tattoos. So for some federations, when they are allowing these tanning products, it's not really a problem anymore. Like, honestly, you can see it yourself. There are living proofs on, especially on Instagram. There are living proof on Instagram. There are living proofs outside there that have competed. That are fully tattooed, like completely covered, and you can't really detect that on stage anymore, which is very cool. For some federations that don't allow for these special kind of tanning products, probably it can have an impact, but overall, I think when you just show up, very impressive, when the tanning product is somewhat covering most of the things and then revealing some of the details one more time, and you would just like have a very muscular build as well, bring the conditioning. I think perhaps it can have an impact, and perhaps it doesn't. At first, I thought it will definitely have an impact, but I've seen like tanning products doing a freaking fantastic job in covering things up. And also, if someone like Z, for example, he is like completely tattooed. But have you seen his build? Have you seen the delts? How they are fucking popping out? Have you seen his quads? If he is getting shredded with the amount of muscle mass that he's carrying, I can't believe that he's placing badly just because of the tattoos. I can't see that, because he is bringing what is required for bodybuilding, right? And that is definitely muscle mass, and hopefully then the conditioning.
I guess this may even have been asked to a judge before. I may have heard it from Lee Kemp, who's the UKDFBA. He runs the UKDFBA with his wife. I think he did comment on it. I actually can't remember what he said, but I think I would have remembered if it was particularly like, oh my God, tattoos are the worst. I think he may have been along the lines of like, you can normally get a good tanning product that can pretty much make it null and void. And let's be honest, even like yourself, even Z, Z's going to be very competitive. He's going to take this to a pretty decent level if he keeps going. But I mean, it's still just natural bodybuilding, right? Yeah. And tattoos, I mean, I don't have any, but I know for you, I imagine those tattoos mean a lot to you if they're well done and you care for what you got, because I know a lot of people get them on like drunk mishaps, which don't do that.
The funny thing is that I was growing up with tattoos, right? My mom had tattoos. My sister got tattoos very early on. My father had tattoos, and I can't even recall my father anymore, right? But I was growing up in that environment. And for me, I got my first tattoo at the age of 18. Once I was actually liable in getting one myself. So for me, it's just like, I don't even notice my tattoos anymore. I think I would feel naked without them. It's just a part of me. I think, without sounding kind of, I don't know, cocky or so, but I think that fits my personality. I know that for other people, it would just be a little bit like, I don't know, it doesn't really fit you. I know it sounds off, but I think it's just, it needs to be on me. Tattoos need to be on me. Otherwise, I don't know. It feels like I would feel naked somehow, to some extent, right? And in the end, do you really want to make the decision of so if you really want a tattoo, like really, because you think it is you, right? You're not doing it because it's a fashion trend or so, right? Because all of a sudden you have the idea of getting whatever tattooed. And then after 10 years, you're just like, I don't know, kind of regret that. If you really are convinced about that, then it doesn't fucking matter whether you want to step on the bodybuilding stage at some point. Because bodybuilding stage, it's like you said, it's natural bodybuilding after all. It is a journey that you take for yourself. It's not meant for you to get a lot of money, a lot of attention, right? No. I could understand the rationale behind it if you were to go to Mr. Olympia or so, right? And even there, even on the Olympia stage, there are people who are fully tattooed and place very well. So, yeah.
What we should get is glute striation tattoos.
Oh yeah,
like so when you're tanned up, it probably would look quite realistic.
Yeah.
Imagine, so. Jesus. That should be out. That should be in the rule book. You can't do that. Cool. We get to the next question. So this is Francisco, and he has asked, "What are your favorite challenges when coaching?"
When I have to go inside myself and facing my pre-biases, or perhaps when I had some pre-notions that I need to overthrow, though. I know that it's not always an easy pill to swallow when you are then confronted with things that you have done perhaps poorly, where you could have done things better, but these are the moments where you are just like kind of growing from, right? And the biggest challenge is then like you are the biggest challenge most of the time. It's not getting people lean, right? There's kind of an easy formula to go there. Same goes for building muscle mass. Of course, sometimes it's hard because the client actually has a hard time adhering to that, or doesn't have the patience that is required in order to build as much muscle mass as possible. So, right? But these aren't really challenges, are they? They are just like, okay, there's a certain personality in front of you, and there's probably a specific formula that works for them. And it's just about finding that formula. I know it sounds a little bit weird, because I make it sound as if I see those people as like a computer program or so, and you just have to find the right formula in order to make the program work. So like an algorithm or anything like that. But kind of we are all like this. And the brain is basically nothing else than a computer, right? So with that being said, it's not really a challenge. working with people, right? It's more like finding out what works for them and then finding out how to make them actually get there. But the biggest challenge is actually overcoming your own pre-biases and pre-notions and actually do what is right for the client and not what is right for yourself, what you deem as correct for the person. Instead, you should always try to actually be objective about the situation and then help the client to what they want and what they need. Right? And I find this to be the biggest challenge. And I always need to remind myself that it's not about me, right? And we can easily fall into the trap of believing like, but this has worked for hundreds of people. And that's why you probably need to go down that route as well, right? And we are always biased due to our experiences and our environment. And we always have to remind ourselves, hey, this is what this person needs is perhaps not what you want, right? And yeah, I think the biggest challenge and also most favorite challenge is my development. I know it sounds very selfish, but I think this is also one of the hardest aspects to overcome.
Hey, Pascal here. I just quickly wanted to remind you of our online coaching service. At Revive Stronger, we put a huge emphasis on the personal aspect of our coaching. And if you want to take your physique and knowledge to the next level, hit the link in the description below.
For a point of difference, because when I was thinking favorite challenge, I just had some things pop into my mind because I had a few challenges recently where, I don't know, a client will just throw a scenario at you or a question at you that you just haven't ever experienced before, or it's just like, it makes you use like your knowledge and apply it to a unique scenario where there's never been a podcast on this. There's not a textbook on this. You just have to think about the principles and how does this correctly apply in this scenario. So I have some, like, you only get this from coaching people. So recently, I think it was one of my clients, they have like a holiday for like 4 days and then they're back for like a week and then they're away for another 5 days. And I'm just like, oh geez, like, what's the best way to strategize around training? And I'm like, you're basically like a little bit into your mesocycle, then you're deloading, but actually you've probably reduced all your fatigue. You could restart the mesocycle if you wanted to there, but then you've got a week and you're kind of fully deloading another week. So it's like strategizing, how do we make the best out of a crummy situation? Those are some really fun things to have to deal with. Or like, again, not many of my clients have this, but I had a client who he skipped 2 leg sessions. He just he was halfway through one and a PT client turned up that he thought was going to come later. So he had to scrap it. And then the other time, again, work, which we can understand.
All I hear are excuses.
Work being his excuse.
He's off the team.
So yeah, he'd skipped these 2 and he was like, should I combine put all those sets into my next training sessions? It'll be a lot of sets, but like maybe I should do that to make up the volume. And I was just like, you've basically deloaded your legs for a week. They're going to be they're going to have actually down-regulated in terms of adaptation. If you add all those sets, you're just going to be fucked. So let's just skip those sessions and come into the next sessions as we were. And quite often it's the simplest solution, and the client's like trying to theorize all these different things. You just, you take yourself through the kind of principles of like exercise science. You're like, this is the answer. I quite like those kind of, the only sort of challenges you get are like very unique, kind of individual, like with a few clients now and then. So they're the ones that popped into my mind. But yeah, the challenge of working with someone where what you normally would do just doesn't work for them, that's challenging. And the reward that you get from working through with them and finding the solution, that's troubleshooting. That's what the role of a coach ultimately is. That's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the role of a coach is finding solutions. Plain and simple, right? And I think that I can't recall where I heard it, and I don't even know whether this is absolutely true. But one of the majority of the most successful people, whatever you may deem as success, but when it comes to like the position, the work that they are doing, is that one of the traits that most successful people have is not that they are the most intelligent people, the smartest people in the room or so, but most of the time they are the ones who have either the biggest amount of experience or who are the best at coming up with solutions, right? And this is something that everyone can benefit of. If there's someone who has a solution to it all, it doesn't need to be the smartest, right? but he's very helpful. And that is what, especially a company, or in that instance also athletes, benefit from.
Awesome. We've got time for one more, haven't we?
Yeah, absolutely.
One more.
Perhaps even the two here.
We've got Z.
There he is. There he is.
He
called me a Nazi here today. Just want to call him out on that one.
That is
Z.
incredibly racist.
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, I said like, yeah, I'm German, so
or prejudice.
Isn't every German kind of a Nazi, right? I mean, yeah, absolutely. That's why I'm speaking English now.
Z's lucky he's not got blonde hair and blue eyes. Yeah. Anyway,
he has colored hair, so maybe
blonde under there.
He is blonde.
Check his pubes.
Yeah.
Z has asked, which exercise tweaks did you find advantageous in your individual context? Most times, only after several years of serious training, we figure out what works best for us. Small details in execution go a long way, especially when it comes to better tensioning of the target muscles and getting the best SFRs. No one can help us discover these minor tweaks, since they would have to be in our skin and feel what we feel. Now that I'm training at home and I have lots of time to experiment, I've been focusing on optimizing every little thing as much as I can. As a result, the training has never been as productive and my MEVs are lower than ever, as you know, Pascal. Would love to hear your experiences. How can his MEVs be any lower? Jeez. He's grown from like this.
I should show the numbers here at some point. It's ridiculous. And then just like here we just began the mesocycle. And I already only had like 2 sets of RDL and 1 set of leg curls. And he came back to me saying like, man, I was sore for days. I think we need to reduce it for the next time to 1 set of RDLs and 1 set of leg curls for the first session.
And this, just to give a stark contrast, Mike Chalice, I coach, he's our physio.
Yeah.
He needs you've seen his form and technique, his intensity. Yeah. He needs shed loads. Like I can't count how much hamstring volume he's got this week. I just had his update today. It's definitely over it's probably near 20 sets already, maybe. Yeah. And he's RDLing at least, I think 2 times a week at least. It may even be 3. I'm not sure.
Poor boy. I feel you, Mike. I feel you. I rather would be someone like Z instead of someone like me or Mike. Like honestly, I even said it here. I don't know. Yeah, in the video I recorded, never wear a badge and never be proud of needing to do a lot of volume. Never. This is not a good thing.
No,
not a good thing. It may be what is necessary, but I would rather always choose the lower amount of volume over the high amount of volume. If I could just like pick one battle.
Z is essentially like, he's not even that advanced, seeing as like his MEVs are so low. Like from an actual like objective standpoint, he's muscular and looks advanced, but I bet he's got way more in him.
But I think he's just so fast twitch dominant, and also he's probably able to recruit a lot of motor units at the same time in order to get that much of a metabolic disruption. Right, because he's still hitting the RERs. It's not that he's always going like completely out or so. First week is still like 3-4 RER, right? And still, this causes a lot of metabolic disruption. Now, you could always make the argument of like, yeah, why aren't you just throwing out the RDLs? Yeah, but at some point, don't you want to do any kind of compound lifts anymore? And in the end, it causes some metabolic disruption, right? It's a lot, which is sometimes it's unfortunate, right? Because of course it hinders him to do more volume, but just take a look at him. It works, right? It works. And then you have to ask the question of like, do you need much more volume for him if this is what the body is actually getting out of that? But yeah, to get back to his question, I think you summed it up so well, Z, that no one else can tell you what will work for you. And this is something that we hit home so often. And this is also something I think we talked about in the last episode when we talked about the pet peeves of biomechanics. No one is able to tell you what you feel inside your body, right? It may be on paper that the perfect execution may look different, but if you feel like, no, this isn't for me, I don't feel it where I was supposed to be feeling it, and I feel it more so in my joints and tendons and ligaments, hey, tweak it. Find out what works for you. And this is also one of the reasons why when I prescribe exercises for my athletes, I never say like wide grip, lat pull down, blah, blah, because I simply don't know whether this is something that feels natural and strong for them. If so, I prescribe lat pull downs. And then I want them to go in there and pick the handle that feels the best to them, right? And this is something that only the athlete themselves can figure out. Of course, you can have a back and forth, then can give a little bit of feedback to the coach saying like, this didn't really work for me. Do you have any kind of suggestions or recommendations on how I can improve that? And then you can actually tweak things together. But in the end, you need to build an awareness of your body. And I think that the great bodybuilders out there, they are the ones who are very much in tune with their body, who are also the ones who do autoregulative approaches, not in the sense that as we know it with RERs or like deloads here and there, but it's more like they are saying like, I left something in the tank, or I just take a week off from training here because I just need to, right? Or taking an additional rest day because I didn't feel ready for it or so, right? And I think that the very successful bodybuilders are very much in tune with the body, the biofeedback that the body is giving them, and also the way they feel the exercise. Doesn't mean that they may be doing everything correctly or so, and that they couldn't improve things. But I think that this is one of the things that probably speaks for them, that they very much listen to their body. And yeah.
I can't add much more, to be honest. Z perfectly said it in terms of like, you have to get there, like Z said, you need to have had many years of lifting with good technique, and only once you know kind of what a solid, just general good baseline, then you can tweak from there, because everything within that context is now good, and whether or not you go slightly wider or slightly narrower or pull into here, pull into there. This is why, and like we said last time, often if it looks great, we'll be like, this looks awesome, how did it feel? And if they're like, it feels amazing, then not much more needs to happen. We don't need to like get really, really deep into things.
And it's very hard to sell that to athletes, right? Because they are signing up with you and they think like, in 1 to 2 years, I'm looking like completely different. But often, very often actually, you need to actually take a step back and clean things up and start from much, much lower, unfortunately, right? But this will pay off in the long term, but many people aren't ready in doing so, right? They rather want to just like, no, I'm not going back there. I want to make progress, but this is actually exactly what holds them back, right? If they were to actually now go back and relearn some of the things, some of the movement patterns, very much get in tune with their body, developing a good mind-muscle connection, then starting from the ground and try to perfectionize the technique and the execution, then it will pay off in the long term, right? And then stagnations and stalling will become much, much less likely in the future. And if you are getting to the point where you're stalling, it is definitely due to some kind of physiological things, and not just because your technique is now coming to a halt, or there's some limitations that hold you back due to injuries or due to your leverages or so, right? But it's more like, you simply don't have the muscular adaptations, and thus you need to now persevere in order to overcome that. It's the same when it comes to someone like, people are always expecting to make progress on a weekly or mesocycle to mesocycle basis. How feasible is that in the long term? Do you think someone like John Meadows, who has trained after 30 years, is still adding some load and repetitions to each and every single set, each and every single week, or even mesocycle? Absolutely not, because otherwise he would be one of the strongest people on earth. He would now let pull down over 1,000 kilograms, deadlift 3,000 kilograms if he was able to always add one repetition or some kilograms to the bar. Not feasible. At some point, your progression will look quite different, right? Your progression will look more so like this, perfecting technique, or you can't even tell that you're progressing anymore on paper, but it's more about like, okay, I'm ticking off the boxes, right? I cash in whenever I can. And as long as you can then say at that point, and I think no one of the listeners is at that point, but I think once you get to that point, you're then able to say like, okay, once I tick off the boxes of like, I take care of my nutrition, I take care of my sleep, take care of my recovery, and I can wholeheartedly say that I train hard and I feel the sessions, and the next day I feel that I trained that muscle group. And doing this repeatedly over the next years, you will grow. It's inevitable, right? But don't expect that at some point you will always see somewhat of a progression on paper, because that's unfeasible, right? So yeah, once again, totally lost my train of thought, and I didn't even know how I got here.
I think it's just that, though. It's like you said, ticking those boxes. And this is why improvement seasons, when you're more advanced, aren't sexy, and you cover up the muscle and you just have to invest and hope, like fingers crossed, things are going well, because you're not hitting massive PRs all the time. It's just very unlikely that that's going to be the case.
Sorry.
I was going to say, I think Jeff Albert said like he's been dumbbell lateral raising the same dumbbells for like 10 years or something crazy. Yeah. It's just like, maybe you progress your mind muscle connection, and that's what leading to it. And eventually you cut down and you're like, that's kind of, now I see it. But during that time, like I spoke with Ben House, you're just investing and you're just being consistent and pushing things. And like you said, if you're getting that good feedback, and that's why for it, when you're more advanced, we like that biofeedback with you feel the disruption, you know you're getting good pumps, you know like the muscle is being stressed, then you got everything else in check. It's inevitable, like you said.
Yeah. I have one client, so shout out to Chris Merrick, who has done exactly what I said. He took a step back, and we have worked on his form and technique and mind-muscle connection for a year, redoing everything from the ground up. And I'm giving him a shout out because big props to him in actually being willing in doing so. And now is the time where I said to him, like, okay, you've now ingrained these kind of things. You've now came to a point where this became kind of an automated process. You don't really need to think about proper execution anymore, because now you have taken the time and actually now reworking that technique, cleaning things up, and now you're able to actually focus on other things as well alongside with that. And now is the time where we can think about adding quantity, because the quality is always the same. And this is something that I can attest to myself in the overreaching week. I can wholeheartedly say that the fifth week of my the fifth set of something like the SLDL still looked like the first set of my SLDL. And also the last rep looked like the first rep on the first set.
Just a bit slower. Maybe just a bit slower.
Yeah, definitely slower. And also, my face wasn't as beautiful anymore. But I think that this should be the prerequisite, that every single rep is looking the same, kind of. I mean, from the way you lift, right? Of course, the intensity in your face should be a little bit different, but that should be the norm, the standard, right? And once you are there, you can actually start pushing it hard, because you don't have to think about like, oh, that cue. I need to think about, oh no, shit. Now I'm neglecting this cue. And once you are over that point of thinking about the technique or the proper execution, you are able then to focus on very much, for example, the area, and thinking about in the midst of a set, like being one rep away from your rep target for the day for that specific area. Then you can even in this single rep think like, okay, am I even there at 2 area now for 12 repetitions, or do I even be able to exceed that for this time? These are the things that you're then able to focus on. Also the mind-muscle connection, right? And sometimes you are even then forgetting about counting reps, because you're so much in the zone of like focusing on feeling things and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, I think it's really clear for people. It's like any skill, like learning to drive a car. When you first learn to drive, you're like, fuck, there's so many things to think about. I can't drive fast. Like this is why learners go so slow. Once you've got everything down, it's just a habit. You're just knocking out, changing gears. smooth. You can drive nice and fast. Yeah. So actually, I guess probably, like learning the motorbike was probably very recent to you. And now like you don't even think about half of it. It's just habit. You just like, whereas before.
And in the beginning it was shit, especially because I haven't gone to driving class for like 12 years. And I was just like, shit, all the signs I never actually notice when I'm driving in a car anymore. And now there are just like things that I need to watch out for because the teacher wants me to actually look out for these kind of things.
Absolutely. Cool. Cool. Be time.
1 minute, 1 hour and 10 minutes actually.
Oh wow, okay. We're done.
So
guys, thank you as always for listening. We appreciate you.
Yeah.
Hopefully this was
Thanks for spending the birthday with me. With me. It was actually my birthday here today. So thank you very much, guys. Oh no, not on the Monday though, but on the day we recorded it. So thank you very much, guys. I still want to hear your estimation on how old I am, actually.
And we'll reveal it next week.
So for the ones who are actually putting a number down there, and it's correct. Right, it's correct. For all the people who are guessing the correct number, I will give them 1 month for free on the membership side.
But now they know how to go and find it. Actually, are they going to listen to this point anyway?
That's true.
Oh no, you're going to change it on Facebook. It's okay.
Yeah, I changed it so that it's not as easy for you guys.
That's the prerequisite.
To find out.
Nice. I like it.
Yeah.
Cheers, guys.
Cool. Cheers.
Have a good one. So I'm Steve Hall, founder of Revive Stronger and a coach of Revive Stronger.
My name is Pascal Flor. I'm the co-owner of Revive Stronger and also a coach, of course.
Revive Stronger has probably been going solidly for 3 years, roughly about 3 years.
Revive Stronger, to me, it is becoming kind of my child, my foster child. It's the gathering and getting together of like-minded people.
We've been expanding the coaching team, which is helping us help more people. But each coach can only help a certain number of people.
Right now, it's all over the place. We have YouTube, we have Facebook, we have Instagram, but there isn't that community aspect behind that.
And so the next step for us is developing a membership site.
So basically, we want to create a family and a community that is then benefiting from another.
A really cool community for people within our little niche is going to be a website.
They will get early access to our podcast.
You can access us, ask us questions.
The community aspect, we have a forum there. You can ask questions, but also you can log your journey.
There's also going to be courses on there.
Courses, presentations on different topics. Discount of past seminar footage. We will log our journey as well. We'll start vlogging.
We're going to have documentaries.
Our entire athletic journey. Furthermore, they get access to an exercise video library.
The exercises that we love for hypertrophy and maximizing hypertrophy, we're going to go through those in depth, telling you how to execute them.
We kept them concise and also mobile friendly so that you can watch them in between your sets.
I'm super excited to grow this community. The amount of value that we're going to be delivering is huge. And I'd love you to be part of it.
You will get so much out of that.
I'll see you inside.